Привіт, слава Україні.
Hey, Героям слава. Should we give
Героям
everyone
слава.
a couple more minutes and then kick off, or do you think everyone's here?
I think everyone is coming, but also everyone will come when it's becoming a podcast. So that's fine.
Yeah. How have you
How
been?
you? Yeah, a very famous question that no Ukrainian can
Answer properly.
answer. It's always awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah. How? What's been your kind of time since we last did it?
Yeah, I don't know. We were talking about it earlier, but I've just been, I don't know, quite perplexed by the seeming need of a lot of foreigners to force Ukrainians and Russians into the same spaces and make us, hug each other, talk to each other and whatnot, when I don't know, I personally am not ready to do that, and I'm sure more people are on the same page with me, and it's just, it's just a little bit shocking and disheartening to see that time and time again happen. And big organizations as well keep forcing us Ukrainians into things that to me seem a bit painful and unnecessary at the moment. But yeah,
it's like that envelope by Amnesty, right?
exactly.
Hey, we fundraise for Ukraine, but our cause is to help Russians
And Ukrainians together anyway.
In a big hug. It's quite disgusting. I think in a way that it's just escapes me very often why it's so hard for many foreigners to understand that putting in the same space Russians and Ukrainians is the same as putting a victim and a person who assaults in the same room without their consent, without the victim's consent. And I have a small theory why it's happening. Because for many people, they're just uncomfortable taking any stances, or it's uncomfortable for them to engage with this issue whatsoever, and they just wanted to go away as quickly as possible. For them, the easiest way to do is to suggest people to hug it out right away, or just so they are not bothered anymore by this tragedy.
And I think it's also this lack of ability or willingness to accept the fact that Russia is doing what it's doing right now, and it's just part of a broader, I think, continuation of this obsession with Russia, Russian culture, Russian everything. And I think it permeates into this as well, because I think people just can't accept, people particularly in the West, just can't accept that it is happening. And the concept of, I think, collective responsibility is something that completely passes people by. But I think enough of you and I ranting as always about ongoing issues that frustrate us every day. I think we have amazing guests today with us, and we should jump into our discussion for today, if you don't mind. And I'll quickly do an introduction of what we're here to do for everyone who's joining us for the first time. For those of you who are joining for the first time, Ukrainian Spaces is a podcast that elevates voices of Ukrainian people and decolonizes conversations about Ukraine. The reason we're here is that we keep seeing millions of Ukrainians with perfect English and other languages sharing their stories across social media platforms. But 6 months into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many of these conversations about Ukraine still seem to be dominated by Western pundits. And this essentially, a lot of the time, reinforces stereotypes, misleading and false narratives, and just outdated preconceptions about Ukraine and Ukrainians. So what we want to do here is foster a relaxed, safe, and chill space for Ukrainian voices to express themselves. But also in season 2, we want to be able to build bridges with people who are important in terms of solidarity for us and who have been allies for us throughout this ongoing full-scale invasion and genocide of Ukrainian people. So I'll pass back to you to introduce our guests.
Yeah, just a quick shout out to our Patreon sponsors, because this show is 100% sponsored and supported by our listeners. And it exists thanks to their generous help. So if you want to become part of a Patreon family, please find it there. It's Ukrainian Spaces, very easy, and join it, and make sure we have more abilities to amplify more diverse Ukrainian voices and decolonize more Ukrainian conversations. This is important. And also, by becoming a sponsor, you can have a front row seat when it comes to asking questions, whether in person or through our Patreon page. This is something for you to consider. Nevertheless, today is extremely important episode for me as a queer Ukrainian. I'm so overjoyed and so proud to see my queer Kharkiv family being defiant, being unapologetic, and launching Kharkiv Pride, despite that Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second largest city in eastern Ukraine, is still being bombed every day. But nevertheless, they will persist, and they will do this year's Pride Week. And that's why we wanted to have this opportunity to feature Ukrainian pride and Ukrainian queer pride and queer pride of Kharkiv. And for that, we have two people who are absolutely badass in exactly that. And first, I want to talk to Ruslana, who is here under the account of Kharkiv Pride. Ruslana?
Yes, hello, Maksym, and everyone else who's present. Very overjoyed to be here with you all.
Ruslana, please, we have one golden rule that every featured person on Ukrainian Spaces introduce themselves. So if you don't mind, tell everyone else who you are, where you come from, and how's your life has changed in the last 6 months of genocide.
Hello, my name is Ruslana, and I'm a fundraising manager for Kharkiv Pride. Kharkiv Pride is a project of the NGO Sphere. It's a Kharkiv-based feminist lesbian NGO, and we've been active for about 10 years. The fund was active, but let's say we've been officially registered for over 10 years, and we've been doing all sorts of projects. But our three main projects are the Kharkiv Pride, the Women's Solidarity Week, and the Community Center Pride Hub for LGBTQ and allies. And I personally have been with Sphere for a little bit over a year, doing fundraising for them, being a part of the team. And for me personally, the life, of course, has sort of been divided for what's been before the 24th of February this year and what was after. At that time when the invasion happened, I was not in Ukraine. I was for my studies in Glasgow, in Scotland. So it was sort of, I very vividly remember this morning when I just woke up. I recently got a new phone and I couldn't figure out how to, it had those like different sort of options to put it on like a sleep mode. So there you would have muted notifications. And I just did like 2 nights before that. And so I didn't have classes that day and I was sleeping and I woke up at like 9 o'clock UK time, which was already 11 in the morning in Ukraine. And I woke up to seeing like 60 notifications on my phone and about 10 missed calls. None of them were from my family in Kharkiv, though, only from my friends asking how my family was. Yeah, but it felt very surreal, but I sort of expected that to happen. And yeah, but it still was beyond awful. And yeah, I think I will never forget that day.
Yeah. Nobody will, of us at least. Thank you. And now I think let's also bring Sarah here. I think Sarah will also fit neatly our attempt to do bridge episodes, although we usually do it based on geography. But Sarah is a perfect example of someone I have no problems calling an honorary Ukrainian by this time. So
Yeah,
Sarah,
absolutely.
hey, you with us?
I am. Hello, Maksym. Hello, Val. Hello, Ruslana. Hello, everyone who's listening. This is Sarah. And when Maksym asked me to be a guest, I responded by saying this was the greatest honor I've ever received in Ukraine. And that's because from when I arrived here, I had been following Maksym. And here was this man who is this pillar of strength while also being fearless in speaking out about colonialism, imperialism, genocide. And I realized, great, I can do my thing in Kharkiv, I can do my thing in Ukraine, and I'll just follow Maksym's lead on the bigger geopolitical issues. And if he's good on it, I can learn from him, and I'm going to be on the right side of history. And so Maksym and Val, through their Ukrainian spaces, and Maksym being, a gay male, has allowed me to find strength in Ukraine that I don't think I would have been able to have had he not had the platform he has. So I'm grateful for the title of honorary Ukrainian. I hope to stay for as long as I can, and we'll see. But it's great to be here in this moment right now. And the fact that Kharkiv is having a Kharkiv Pride, the city that's been my home for the last 6.5 months, is just mind-blowing to me, and in a wonderful way, in a great way. And it just goes to show the resilience of the Ukrainian people, the LGBT community, and the people in the city of Kharkiv and Kharkiv Oblast to continue moving forward. As Maksym said, we were hit with rockets last night. I was at the border region today. I posted a little video from there. There was artillery going on there. The war is not over in Kharkiv. The war is not over in Ukraine. And that's why more than ever, Ukrainian Spaces is a necessary platform. And I'm just so grateful to be on it.
I cannot even thank you, but when it comes to bravery, this is something I check on you every morning to check on your tweets and how you're doing, because Sarah has been at the front lines since the day first, and absolutely bravest, badass person who keeps reporting on this war. And thank you so much for doing that. Can you tell us a bit more how you ended up in Kharkiv as a journalist? And because this is something that I wish everyone know, as many people as possible, your story, because it's absolutely astounding and very, very much Ukrainian these days.
And I apologize if I cry, but the story, especially because the LGBT connection right now in Kharkiv Pride, and a shout out to Anna, who I took to she's connected with Kharkiv Pride, and I took her about 5 kilometers from Russia maybe a month ago, and we were in the van together, and it was me and her and another journalist, and I was escorting them to a farm and in some other places. And when she told me she was with Kharkiv Pride, my head almost blew off, because sometimes in the middle of a war, you forget that there's other layers that make you up, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up right now, Maksym, is you said, how did I end up in Kharkiv? I didn't think I was going to be allowed into Ukraine. I came to cover the refugee story for 2 weeks, and I didn't think they were going to let me into Ukraine as a trans person. And so when I was led into the country, which was a longer process, but not in any way negative, I got credentialed, which was also a very interesting process. Ukraine did a very deep background check on me. So both my legal name, Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, and my former name are on my press badge, which is a unique situation, but I couldn't even be upset about that because of the security concerns regarding saboteurs in the country. And when I fell in love with Ukraine was the first week of March, and I was in Ivano, and two guys from the security services of Ukraine came up to me, and they were from Kharkiv. And they said to me, all the journalists are leaving Kharkiv. We'll drive you to Kharkiv now. If you come with us, we'll drive you to Kharkiv. We can't promise you might be stuck there for a week. We don't know what's going on, because this was March 8th. And the Russians, now we know looking back, I think the Russians were pushed out on March 7th. And I said to the person I was with, I said, are they really security services? And she said, yes. I said, what should I do? She said, you need to tell the world what's happening. And I jumped in a car with these strange men, and I drove across the country into a war zone. And I've been here ever since. And I can tell the world, and I've said this to BBC, I've said it to other stations, and I know and I want to say this especially with Kharkiv Pride here, I know not every LGBTQ situation is the same, but I am treated better as a trans woman in Ukraine than I was in the United States, because in Ukraine, they're focused on who you are and the type of person you are and what you can do for the country and what you can do for your community. And a lot of the other bullshit that's happening in the US isn't going on here right now. And that's made it easier for me to stay, because I'm with people who appreciate me for me. And I love your country for that reason.
Thank you so much. Wow. I know you told us this many times before, but it's always, I'm all trembling inside hearing this. Thank you so much for sharing this. Ruslana, tell us, if you can please, why, because, when I posted news about Kharkiv Pride going ahead with this year's Pride March and Pride events, a lot of people in the comments, the majority of them were very supportive, and that post even went a bit of viral. But then lots had also concerns how it could be an active war zone, as Russian genocidal bombs still raining on Kharkiv, why people think it's important to persist and have this event. And I understand that you cannot reveal many of the details because of security issues, and of course we will we will find out and know a bit later. But in general, can you explain the rest of us why Kharkiv queer family felt like this is extremely important to do in these circumstances?
Yeah, I'm aware about the reaction that some people might get about, holding a Pride Week in a literal war zone. But, there's kind of a saying that we had at Kharkiv Pride that goes as, if LGBTQ people are ready to die for the country, then the country also should be ready to celebrate them, and the society should be ready to accept them. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, because we don't want people to forget that we're here, that throughout this whole war, LGBTQ people have also been fighting, have been dying, have been here together with everyone, sharing the same faith, sharing the same values, wanting the same things, Ukraine's victory. And so for us, it's very important to proceed forward and to show the people in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine that we are here with everyone, and that we are more united than ever as a community, as the society in Ukraine, in face of this ongoing genocide committed by Russia. And also, I would like to kind of highlight that a part of this Pride will be dedicated to commemorating the memory of our fallen members of the community, activists, and their memory and what they've done. And it's very important to us to also pay tribute, because, in real life, you don't always have time. And it's sort of, the time goes on and the war goes on. And this would be a kind of a perfect opportunity for us to say thank you for those that are with us all the time, and to say thank you and we remember you and we cherish you to those who have unfortunately passed.
Yeah.
Thank you. I pinned one of the articles. I want people to learn the names of Ukrainians that perished in this genocide. And one of those Ukrainians who died very early was killed, murdered by Russian bombing, was one of our fellow LGBT activists and part of our Kharkiv queer family, Elvira Shemur. And she was a very kind of a known, respected activist in Kharkiv, and she traveled to Kyiv Pride as well and volunteered a lot. She was just 21 years old, and when the invasion started, the first thing that she did, despite that the bombs were already raining down on Kharkiv, she really rushed to the volunteer center in the building of Kharkiv regional administration. And she was in that building when it was bombed, specifically directly targeted by Russians, among other dozens of people who unfortunately were killed in that building. And I think, during this Kyiv Pride and in other events during this year, her photo was brought up everywhere, not because she's the only one who got killed, but because she represented so much in terms of resilience, in terms of queer Ukrainians, like the rest of us, everyone, just rushed to answer the call when when our country got invaded and genocide started. Sorry, it's an emotional start and very heavy one, but I think it's important to highlight. Val, can you?
Yeah, of course. I wanted to quickly ask Sarah a question, and thankfully we have Tatiana now Denford who helps us with the questions that we ask and with some of our sort of crowdsourced questions from our patrons. But Sarah, I wanted to ask you, over the past 6 months, what have been some of the sort of moments that you can remember that kept you going and empowered you in covering this war and sort of, helping you push through your fear, whether that's stories that you've seen of people or anything at all? It would just be really interesting to know what has been sort of the source of that of your energy that keeps you going in what you do in Ukraine.
Before I get to that, I just wanted to say that the first major attack that I covered was the regional oblast building. It was my I had been here for about a week prior, but it was my exposure to war. It was my baptism to seeing death. And the story you just gave, Maksym, adds such a relevance and pertinence to it now that I know a little bit more about some of the victims. There was one story that was really crazy. It was the worst week that I had in Ukraine. I was being attacked terribly. It was the week of it was Easter week, and I was being attacked by allegedly pro-Ukraine supporters. I was being attacked by Russians, and it culminated in Maria Zakharova putting out a statement attacking me. And I was bawling. I was going to go home. And one of the security guys, when I say security, state security services that I was embedded with, he looked at me. He said, "You've lived here now. You've seen death. You've seen war. Why are you crying?" And I said, I'm crying because everyone hates me and the Russians hate me and it's awful. And what am I doing here? No one respects me, etc. And he laughed in my face and he said, "That's the biggest badge of honor you could have earned. So stop crying and understand that if they're aiming for you, if they're aiming at you, it means you are doing something right. So you're going to get attacked worse, but stop fucking crying." And he cursed at me. And the same person, about 2 weeks before, said, "Sarah, are you Muslim?" I said, "No, I'm not Muslim." He said, "How come you sleep in a headscarf every night?" I said, "Because I don't want you guys to see me without my hair." He said, "You've been sleeping 2 meters away from us for the past, whatever it was, 5 weeks at that point. Be comfortable, because I don't want you going anywhere for a long time." And those two moments regarding my gender, and then a few weeks later regarding the fact that I had lost sight of what was important in a war zone, where the whole idea of sticks and stones can break your bones, but names will never hurt you. And those two moments stuck with me. Those two moments made me understand that I was appreciated as a human being as much as just being a mouthpiece, for the events that were taking place here. The other moment was a really bad week of war, and civilians always get killed. But I had seen several dismembered bodies, and I reported. And 2 days later, I went up north. When I say north to the audience, I mean going towards the Russian border zone. And I was about 10 kilometers from Russia. And a woman was hit by a mortar on a bicycle. And her head went in one direction, and her hands went in another. And I'm reporting next to her intestines. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm so grateful I'm the person here right now, because for whatever reason, I know that's a human being. For whatever pain, whatever situation, this is a human being. This is a hero of Ukraine that will never die, even though she gave her body for her nation by riding her bicycle and being hit by a mortar sent from the Russian terrorist. And I knew at that point that no matter what happened, if it was within my possibility, I wanted to stay through the end of the combat and through victory. Because if I'd been able to be put into a position where I can do my job and be trusted to do my job and still be able to understand that the human being and the human essence can never be lost during war, then I have to take advantage of that gift that I've been given. And so those were the three moments. Two that came from me as a person, and one was me realizing that for whatever reason, I'm still able to do this after, at that point, it was like 4.5, 5 months. I need to be here for as long as I can in order to still show the world the terrorism against Ukrainians and show the world that there's no country stronger than Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's much appreciated, as well as for so many Ukrainian and also foreign journalists who keep documenting this genocide, risking their lives, despite everything, trying to make sure that this story is not forgotten and not erased like many other genocides done by Russian colonialism. Ruslana, wanted to ask you a bit, maybe for some of our audience who do not really still know about the situation in Ukraine when it comes to equality, when it comes to civil rights equality, and situation for queer Ukrainians. And sometimes the messaging could be quite confusing. Lots of folks keep asking me, for example, why it happens so that there are a growing number of openly queer soldiers coming out and serving openly, proudly. We have the largest number ever. Why the acceptance for queer for equality for queer Ukrainians in Ukraine has hit the record high number of over 60 or 65% during the genocide. So I understand that it's a bit of a heavy question, but maybe you have a bit of your perspective why this progress is happening so rapidly. I mean, all of this horror, and why it's important part of the story of Ukraine resisting.
I think if we sort of look at the general trend in Ukraine, that it has been already, even before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine sort of been on this way to becoming a more open, having more tolerant society. If you look at those poll numbers, every single year you can see a positive dynamic. Now, let's say before the Revolution of Dignity, you would have something like 70% of the Ukrainian population have a negative attitude towards queer people, then and that number would decrease with each year. And that's due to, of course, the dedicated work of organizations and individual activists in many areas, in community engagement, in advocacy work, in grassroots activism. You would have those efforts been put in places to actually sort of, change the perception of the LGBT people in society, have those educational events, have people more aware of how things are. And then, of course, if we're talking about it in the context of the ongoing war, then I think what influenced the most is the idea that Ukrainians are different. They can be different, but they are still Ukrainians. We're all together. We're united. We have this identity. We have this mission in us to be Ukrainians and to fight for what we love and what we believe in. It's our country, and sort of this is irrespective of gender identity, sexual orientation, or any other qualities that people have that's sort of maybe proved to some people who were sort of on the fence or questioning their position, or who were not as open or not as tolerant, to see it with their own eyes that we're all in this fight together. And that's what I kind of believe that brought that number even higher than before the invasion. Yeah, so that's what I think influenced the most.
Would you maybe also agree that it's somehow linked to the process of decolonization, that a lot of Ukrainians are going through this kind of awakening moment? Because lots of folks that do not maybe even know openly queer people, or are not very educated on the issue whatsoever, I hear more often these days, they're like, look at Russia and what Russia represents, and it's, of course, fascism, hatred, homophobia, sexism, and all those toxic values. And they just juxtapose it and say, like, I don't want to be anything of that.
What I can say for sure is that Russia had huge influence in that matter in Ukraine. They did put a lot of money into financing those hatred, the hate speech, and those, radical or fascist movements, or, for example, the radical conservative sort of religious and church ideas that also came mostly from Russia. And we cannot deny that Russia played a huge role into keeping Ukraine keeping Ukraine homophobic, influencing the minds of people, and sort of expanding their influence in that area as well, because that was something that they also knew that would be an issue for Ukraine's integration into the European Union. So maybe there was also kind of one of the ways to keep Ukraine more conservative, therefore more aligned with Russia, therefore further away from the West. So that is what we sort of observed throughout the years, that in Kharkiv specifically, or in general, if you had a pro-Russian talking head in Ukraine, they would never ever support LGBT or feminist movements, just because they didn't, and it wasn't in their kind of box of values. And then you would have a lot of pro-European or pro-Western activists, and almost all of them did support, either openly or not openly, the queer community and feminist movements. So then you can already see this kind of cleavage working out in Ukraine as well, in that sense that the people who are pro-Russian were under the influence of their TV and their media and their propaganda. They leaned more conservative, they leaned more homophobic, and the people who were less subjected to that, they leaned more sort of open-minded and pro-Western.
Yeah, thanks. Sarah, can I ask you one question? One of the things that I also face when we talk about the queer people in Ukraine and equality, and featuring our queer fighters and queer volunteers, people tell me and use these Western popular terms like pinkwashing and tokenism. And I was wondering to ask you, what would you like personally say or what are you saying these days to people who tell you that this isn't just an issue that Ukraine might use to benefit from it, and basically playing the pinkwashing card? That doesn't mean that there's an actual ground and actual basis for that kind of acceptance in Ukraine.
I tell them now, I don't try to argue with them anymore about it. I'm very blunt. Sorry about that. I'm very blunt. And one of the things that I tell them is that regardless of what happened with the LGBT community, Ukrainians are people who are undergoing genocide currently. They're victims of terrorism. They've been victims of Russian imperialism for hundreds of years. And so if they are so caught up in whether this is pinkwashing or not, then they've already lost sight of the fact that there's one of the greatest cases of terror to afflicted people in modern history, and there's nothing I can do to convince them otherwise.
Right. Yeah. That's a very cool way. It's like, don't waste our time with that. Yeah, I partially probably agree, because it's just a Google search away, and there are so many openly queer Ukrainians online that you can amplify, and you can reach out and calibrate your views and just easily ask, like, okay, I have this view of Ukraine, and you're a queer Ukrainian, right? So what do you think about it? And not often those people even ask or care about it.
If I may just add to that really fast, I write for LGBTQ Nation. It's the largest queer publishing company in the world. I think I wrote 30 plus bylines from here in the first 5 months, and almost exclusively on human rights or LGBTQ issues. There was so many different facets of the LGBT community here that I almost got swallowed up by it. And to me, that shows that there wasn't pinkwashing so much as that Russia's war of terrorism and genocide against Ukraine has allowed all of a sudden these groups and individuals, Kharkiv Pride and others, to have a voice that maybe they wouldn't have had before. But we've always been here, right? It's not just a saying, it's a fact. We've always been here. And in Ukraine, the queer community, apparently, because as you said, Maksym, just a moment ago, there's so many available to speak about things online. They're around, as Ruslana knows with Kharkiv Pride. There's the different pride organizations from the east to the west of Ukraine, north to the south, that all the war has done is given a voice to people who have always been here. And that's also beautiful to recognize, too, is that thanks to the bravery of all Ukrainians now have the opportunity to speak up and lobby for their own existence. And that's something that can't ever be forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I also wanted to ask Ruslana briefly. I know that, of course, for those maybe who have not been familiar, you guys have been doing incredible work as well prior to 6 months ago. But I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how the work that Kharkiv Pride and maybe s2e5 as well do has changed, and what are you guys up to sort of now in terms of supporting people on the ground, and also I guess the natural question after that is how can people get involved and support the work that you do, because it's so crucial and important to continue.
So I might start with what we did before. I already talked about it briefly in my introduction, that we had those sort of 3 major projects that we worked on: is Kharkiv Pride, the Women's Solidarity Weeks that we implemented in March, and also the community center for LGBT people, the Pride Hub. So it's like the only community center in the region and overall in the east of Ukraine. And of course, also beyond that, we did most of the community events, on community engagement, mobilization, also educational events like lectures or documentaries, or we also did volunteers workshops or sort of different kind of capacity building events as well. So working with LGBT people and women primarily. We did, for example, a project on lesbian blogging recently, or we did before the project we had hosted in the Pride Hub, a queer choir who had their sort of sessions there. So all different kinds of projects. And since 2019, we've been doing Kharkiv Pride. In 2019, we did it for the first time. And 2020, due to the corona, we did it as in the form of auto pride with cars. And then in 2021, we did it again, sort of in a classical Pride Week with events culminating with a Pride March. And that was the largest march route in Ukraine up to this day, which we're very proud of. And since the 24th of February, of course, our physical work in Kharkiv itself decreased a lot, as some people evacuated, because now currently some people from the team are outside of Ukraine, some people in different regions of Ukraine, some people stayed in Kharkiv. And so after that, we sort of started to figure out what can we do to help the community to sort of build on that. And we started getting requests for help, and if we know how to do this, or how to evacuate, how to go abroad, or where they can find certain resources, or if we can help them. And then we started fundraising money, and we got some funds to do assistance, like financial support program and humanitarian assistance. So we, to this date, help more than 1,000 people around Ukraine. I believe 1,100 people, a little bit more than that, in the framework of that program that we sort of gave them assistance in purchasing first hand necessities like food and water, and also, of course, helping some people evacuate, and those sort of things that we've kind of qualified as a humanitarian organization for a couple of months, which was very hard because this was not something that we did before. It was a big challenge for everyone in the team. And now we're focused on the Pride, but we're preparing to resume the program again because the needs are still there, and a lot of LGBT people in our region are still in need of help. And yeah.
I wanted to bring Tatiana, who's part of our Ukrainian Spaces family. She had a question as well for you. Tatiana, привіт.
Hi, привіт, Ruslana. Hi, Sarah. So I'm just, first of all, I just want to say that it's beautiful to listen to both of you speak with such passion and such emotion. And I think it's really quite inspiring for so many of us, not just listening, but kind of people who see your activism and see how much heart you put into making a difference in the world in general. Ruslana, and my kind of approach sometimes with guests is that I kind of want to see the humans behind the stories and to see kind of who you are and kind of what makes you tick. And Ruslana, I wanted to ask you, has there been one moment in particular in the last kind of 6 or so months where you felt like your activism and your commitment to activism evolved in like a new way? Did you learn something new about your activism and about how passionate you are and how you approach all of these different initiatives? Do you feel like there was a watershed moment in the last 6 months where you thought, you know what, I'm going to ramp it up a bit. I'm going to kind of create something new. This is like a new chapter to my story.
I cannot say that there was a chapter, but I remember there was one request that we handled in our support program from a queer woman whose car broke down, and she sort of talked about it very emotionally, how she needed to like evacuate herself and her daughter, and then the car broke down, and like we are the only ones that she can come to, and if we can like offer her money quickly and we can like kind of support her and assist her in getting cash and fixing her car. And then the the picture that she sent us was, the car being repaired and everything. And that time I was like, okay, we are actually changing someone's life right now, because the person needed money urgently. They needed to fix it and to evacuate. And in that sense, it kind of brings this feeling that you are not just there kind of sitting and writing, because I'm doing, quite honestly, more administrative work, of course, which is also activism, but let's say on a more of a boring side of it. unlike some of my colleagues who actually do, for example, now community events in Ukraine. I'm more, sort of behind the computer, but I also know that how important it is to people on the ground and to everyone who we are helping, that it's not just, some applications that I'm sending, or it's not just some administrative work, that we're actually changing lives and helping people make sort of life-changing decisions and proceed and get a chance in peaceful, good life. So this is very important, and to help people from the community also, especially personally, very important to me. So this is when I sort of started seeing my work more of an activism, less than administrative work.
Yeah, and do you know what I think? I think in particular, the world right now is connecting on a much more human level. I think a lot of people are turning away from the war narrative and the kind of the gruesome details, even though that's really important. I think what's interesting is that the humanity that people are seeing, within the Ukrainian community is leaving such an important impact. And I think, having those moments, especially, and that's part of what Ukrainian Spaces does, is that it connects people on a much more human level with all these stories. And honestly, those are the lasting impressions that people are going to get, because these are real people who are affecting so many lives right now with their activism and their frontline work and their writing and their, it's like so inspiring. And I love your answer to that, because that woman will never forget that moment, and neither will you.
Yeah, and it's also partially what has made us stand out for so long since the beginning of this, the humanity, the common sort of understanding and feeling for helping everyone, and just being aware of how what we do affects other people, I think has really been super crucial to to our essentially slow but steady progression and movement towards winning and helping people kind of get back to whatever the new normal is. But I think we're almost at the end of the hour of conversation that we've had today, and I wanted to ask Ruslana, before we finish, our favorite question we ask everyone at the end of each episode, and I think you've already touched upon it briefly, but we wanted to find out from you, what does it mean to be Ukrainian for you personally? And has that changed at all for you since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in February?
Before Ruslana goes, maybe I'll ask Sarah a version of that question, because we started asking it, Ukrainian allies, a bit of a variant of that. And it goes like that. In the last 6 months, of course, you've seen Ukrainians, and you've shared with Ukrainians so many situations of life and death, and as well. And by staying put, you basically also sacrifice so much as well. But I was wondering, like, in the last 6 months of watching Ukrainians, is there something that really speaks in terms of values to your values as well? Something that aligns, something that in sync with who you are? Maybe you can share with us if you don't mind.
It's the simplest word: honor. I've never seen a nation with more honor, and it's made me become a more honorable person, because I understand that the difference between losing an entire population, an entire language, an entire world, and not, can sometimes come down to honor and the decisions that are based on that. And that's what I've learned, that Ukraine is a land of honor. And for me to be here, I have to I had to have stepped up to a higher appreciation of humanity because the Ukrainians are the best of us.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is an amazing answer. Ruslana, if you like to go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I can be as poetic, honestly, but for me, being Ukrainian is sort of a sense of belonging to a community of people, of an unbreakable and, as Sarah said, an honorable community of people that I feel understands me on every level. It's a diverse and different community of people, but in any case, sometimes when you because I've been abroad, I've been abroad for this couple of months, and sometimes when I see Ukrainian people or like I hear them on the street, I get this kind of sense of a nationhood and brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you can call it. So then you immediately feel connected to them. So this is kind of some kind of shared bond that strengthened after the 24th of February, that became more apparent after the 24th of February for a lot of people. And I think some Ukrainians probably share this feeling with me, is that especially when you meet someone outside of Ukraine, you're like, oh, this is another Ukrainian. I know they will understand me. I know we can connect. So this is kind of belonging to the community of people who understand you, who feel you, and who can get what you're all about. This is, for me, is being Ukrainian.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. We're honored to have this from both you, Sarah and Ruslana. It's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, thank you. And it's an honor to amplify the work of you both that you do. You do proudly as queer people, proudly as just people of integrity on the most brutal front line that it's out there in Europe at the moment. So thank you so much. We will wrap up quickly. I wanted to come back to the questions we asked in the beginning. There are some answers in the comments about why some foreigners are so obsessed of putting Russians and Ukrainians in the same space. One of our followers, Max, says it may also have to do with the consequences of what Ukrainians and Russians not being able to make peace together really means. It means the conflict goes beyond Putin and won't be resolved soon, beyond the war itself, which is scary to a lot of Europeans and North Americans. And there's another comment that I really also like. I think it's from Zeta account called Zeta. I think it's because the West, foremost the US, are very individualistic. Collective guilt is something very foreign to them. Well, that's also an interesting take. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, and keep sharing, and we will amplify. For the rest of you, this is it. This has been a live broadcast that then automatically recorded and later uploaded as a podcast episode. So if you listen it as a podcast episode, please, if you loved it, read it, comment under this podcast, because it helps us to trend on these platforms, and leave your feedback as well. We love to amplify that. And Val, I know that we also have a very nice comment that someone who follows the project also shared.
Yeah, of course. It's from one of our longtime listeners, but essentially it's a message that says, hi, I'm a longtime listener of Ukrainian Spaces from America. I'm sure you get a lot of these, but I just wanted to finally personally thank you for all the work you do. I have learned so much about Ukraine from you, Val, and the guests. And Slava Ukraini. So thank you so much for for the fact that you keep supporting us. It means a lot and keeps Maksym and I and Tatiana now going and continuing this effort.
This is it. Apart from one thing, is Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava, and thank you everyone for joining us.